This is Decadance.
We are focusing this week on how to deal with panic attacks and how to cope with stress. So the first thing I think we should be doing here is defining shock, panic attacks, and what's going on and what we can do to help ourselves.
Okay, very good. So people may be familiar with having experiences of shock or panic, and quite literally at a definitive level, shock is when a cell is not getting enough oxygen. So as we start to then expand from there and start to look at us being like a community of cells, if we're not getting enough oxygen to our cells, we start to have issues. When that starts to happen at system and body level, then we start to have even bigger issues. So you can imagine yellow light flashing, then going to red light flashing. So if we can start to identify what it is that's happening within us when we have an experience of shock leading to panic, or worst case scenario is a panic attack, when the anxiety of panic begins to overwhelm the person, then what we can start to do is to take steps to be able to balance out our lifestyles and each moment as it's happening, to be able to make sure we can maintain balance and furthermore equanimity, which will be balance but in a sense of maintaining peace during difficult times.
So go back to that word, equanimity.
Equanimity.
Explain that a little bit, because I'm dyslexic. I don't really know what that means.
Equa, like equal, and what we're looking to do is find an equal balance within ourselves even during difficult times. So even though we might be going through a lockdown, how can we still maintain level and fairly stress-free and make the best of that situation?
Sure. So what actually happens inside of us during panic?
Well, panic can be defined as sudden, overwhelming feeling of fear or extreme anxiety. And what happens inside of us is we start to have a build-up of stress chemicals. And that build-up of stress chemicals is essentially going to set off our flight or fight response, which previously during our evolution would have been a good thing. But if we're literally locked in our houses and not able to move around, then that flight or flight stress response starts to become a maladaptive response, meaning it causes more stress than it actually resolves.
Sure. So what can we be doing to be able to decrease fight or flight responses?
Good question. At a fundamental level, practicing mindfulness of our thoughts, our emotional triggers, changes in our breathing and also our body language. So if we start to notice changes that are identified with a stress response or a closing up mentally, emotionally, energetically, what we can do is start to identify that, notice when it's happening to us in each moment, and then be able to do our practices to be able to resolve that. So taking ourselves from a stress state into a more relaxed state.
Yeah. So I guess it all comes back to COVID and being locked in. How can people kind of deal with things going into the next lockdown? Because have you got any tips that people could be coming up with? Because everyone didn't handle the first pandemic, the first lockdown very well, did they? So you say people are coming out of this and they kind of learned from the first one, but there are some that definitely didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a learning curve for everyone. This kind of thing has never happened before, and the next 6 months are going to be 6 months, 12 months. The next few years are going to be really interesting, but essentially what we're doing is going to be figuring out ways to be able to deal with our stress indoors rather than and outdoors where possible. But if we're not able to get outdoors as much as we would have during the summer, we want to find out how we can deal with those kind of stresses from life indoors, and also in ways that we can apply all the time, not just when we're outdoors.
Sure. Okay, so what would be your holistic overview of how to deal with stress and panic?
Yeah, so it is developing that understanding of ourself and how we react in certain situations, physically, emotionally, mentally, and energetically. And it's important to notice all of those levels, because sometimes that stress can manifest in different ways, not such as having headaches, noticing shallow breathing, feeling a drop in blood pressure, noticing you're feeling stomach pains or nausea, not losing your appetite, and feeling stressed from different things can result in different experiences, such as you can feel a loss of appetite when you're stressed, or you can also feel really hungry when you're stressed, depending on if it's stressed from a volume of lots of stuff or stressed from an intensity.
So I guess it all comes back again to what we were saying last week, where you really just need to take some time and focus on yourself.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to that fundamental. So Could you share some ideas and guidance for our listeners as to how to manage their stress, reduce panic, and improve their mental health and well-being?
Yeah, most definitely. So we're going to talk about this in terms of what we can do as a practice, and also just wanting to let everyone know that we're going to put links in the radio, but you can go to www.infinitebeing.co and click on the contact details there and send us an email. We're also going to have a link up on social media, so look for information there. But what I'm going to be doing is running a course and classes over the next 4 weeks and into the future to help people deal with their mobility and their breathing and their meditation, because these are the key foundations that I can explain more at a later stage of how our body literally holds emotion in its physical structure. And if we can mobilize that emotion physically, then it helps it to also mobilize it energetically and mentally, which helps it to be something that we can process more easily. So those courses are going to be available, and also noticing when we shift into our stress response, which is our fight or flight breathing response up in our chest. So if we have shallow breathing, if we notice like jitters in our hands and stuff, what we can then do is start to do some relaxation breathing techniques and mindfulness to then be able to shift back into a relaxation response. So we can talk about one of those as well in just a moment. Yeah, well, what I want to do actually is ask you about your experiences with stress, shock or panic.
Oh God. Which day? Which hour? Which minute?
Well, this is it. And if it's affecting you at that kind of level all the time, every time, what can we do to be able to change it? So what I'd like you to do, Taylor, is please give me an example that you're happy to share with the listeners about panic and stress.
Okay, so I wouldn't go so much into the reason I was panicking, but I think when I feel most panicked and I do have these mini attacks, I wouldn't say I'm accustomed to massive panic attacks, but even little ones, it's when I don't feel in control, when something's out of my hands and I feel like I can't do anything, whether that's just getting breakfast or helping my friends. If there's something I can't do and it's completely out of control, that's when it really stresses me, and it's just like constant pulses of negativity saying, oh, you can't do it, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need to get out of that mental bubble.
Yeah, and those voices or thoughts can get louder when we are dealing with like increasingly stressful situations for increasingly stressful amounts of time. When you start to get into those stressful situations, it really can feel like it's probably like your heartbeat that you're hearing.
Exactly.
But essentially it's starting to notice those changes and sort of identifying as soon as you can when you are feeling stressed, and then starting to shift into your relaxation mode, because we can't really deal with the fight or flight stress response the same way that we used to be able to deal with it, which is really important for pretty much everyone that's working office jobs or in transportation and stuff like that, because all the time that you're sitting down but you're experiencing a level of stress without it moving anywhere, it's just building up inside your system. So we need techniques to be able to reduce that.
And what techniques would you recommend for people dealing with, well, not even massive panic attacks, just like I said with myself, just smaller, overwhelming thoughts, and how they can deal with that?
Yeah. Well, it's starting as soon as possible, which is finding out. Yeah.
Right now.
Right now.
Listen, pay attention, do.
As soon as you start to notice any sort of like emotional trigger to anything outside of yourself, or especially something inside of yourself like your own thoughts or thoughts that you hear, it's something that you can then start to do in terms of mindfulness, which would be bringing your awareness back to the present moment. And without becoming too philosophical about it, it's more just the present moment, like what's happening in the present moment, and that's something that you can bring your awareness to, like your physical senses, the temperature of your skin, the wind blowing, your heartbeat, or the sensation of your breathing.
I think people just forget all these things that are so close to home. They keep looking for all these weird and exotic ways of trying to cheat a way to get better and make themselves more mindful, but it's really just the more basic things, isn't it? Like breathing, nature, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, from a woo-woo more perspective kind of it kind of is like we are playing Sims, and if we imagine having needs and contentness bars, if it was like checking the power bar on our phone to see how much charge that we had left, it would make life a lot more simple. But because we've got lots of different bars in terms of our contentness, we have to make sure that we're addressing all of those to be able to maintain ourselves well and make sure that we have that charge for life.
We're such complex people.
That's it.
We really are, aren't we? We're very needy people. Why can't we just be like a cat or something? Very easy needs.
Cats just look after themselves instinctually, though. They've got the animal instincts, so we're getting conditioned out of that in society nowadays. But something in terms of returning to the present moment is returning to something which we can influence. And this is our breathing. So on the one hand, when we think of our breathing, we may think of it as something that we don't do, that our body does automatically, and the same with our thinking, and that we notice when we aren't focusing on our breathing that our thinking then begins to change as our breathing changes. So as our breathing becomes more sharp, short and shallow, then all of a sudden our thoughts become like that as well. And as we can deepen our breathing, we start to relax that stress response. Our brain and our body begin to expand and then elevate, rather than hold on to those more heavy emotions which can pop up so easily.
And then you build up the pressure, etc., etc. It makes complete sense. So we are here to do our last part, because you want to go over some of the courses that you offer that could benefit panic and stress massively, especially with the 7-second breathing that we was talking about on last week's show. So what have you got to say about that?
Well, again, it's noticing all the different forms of stress and in different contexts, because that's often where we can get lost into. But it's the same pattern of stress that our body's having to deal with. And in terms of that, as soon as you begin to notice that you're feeling stressed, your heart rate's increased, your breathing's become more shallow, what you can do is begin to do our 7-7 breathing. And this is slowing down your inhale to 7 seconds, and then your exhale to 7 seconds. And you can go 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. But what you're looking to do is slow down your body and through your breathing to the point where you then start to shift into your relaxation response, and everything starts to calm down and become a lot more relaxed. And then if you maintain that, it becomes a lot easier to process the emotions that you're feeling. So in terms of the 7-7 breathing, literally just breathing in for 7 seconds and then out for 7 seconds, and doing that for a minute or two so that you can start to feel those changes in your body.
It really does. I gave your method a few tries this week. It's just such a simple thing to do. It doesn't take any of your time out. It just benefits you. So definitely worth trying out. And what are some of the courses that you're offering with Infinite Being that could also benefit people from this?
Very good. So offering a one-on-one services are going to be online, so you'll be able to do calls with us, FaceTime calls, and also be able to do online coaching services through an application. So it's like shows you the videos and exercises that you can do from there. But we're also going to be offering online classes. And the online classes for movement and breath work and meditation are going to be providing some essential skills that people can practice every day to be able to help maintain themselves through those practices of improving the way we can move, our mobility, implementing breath work to achieve specific responses in the body, and then also practicing meditation to be able to, it's essentially like if you went onto your phone, clicked up all the apps and saw there was loads of apps running, your phone's going to be pretty chaos. So if you can start to close some of those apps through meditation or mediating your own thought processes, everything becomes a lot calmer.
It does indeed. It does indeed. So I'm going to actually try one of those courses out because they're such beneficial. We're going to have to move on now, but it's been an absolute pleasure, as always.
God bless. Always a pleasure to be here.
Obviously, we've got lockdown coming up, so things are going to get a little bit more difficult for everyone. So we're going to be getting you on the old Zoom call here in the studio, because I've still got to come to work, obviously, so that's all the fun.
I know you're healthy. It's okay.
This is Decadance.